The moment I parked my moving truck in front of my new home, a furious woman stormed across the street, her face twisted with rage. "You don't belong here," she screamed, jabbing a finger at my house, a house that wasn't even in her precious HOA. Her demands escalated, threatening to force me out before I could unpack a single box. My dream home was becoming a nightmare, and I hadn't even stepped inside. What kind of neighborhood had I moved into? And why was this stranger so determined to drive me away? Stick around to find out how this explosive showdown unfolds. I'd always dreamed of a fresh start, a place to call my own where I could finally put down roots. After years of saving, I found it, a charming two-story house with a wraparound porch nestled at the edge of a quiet suburban neighborhood called Willow Creek. The street was lined with manicured lawns and blooming flower beds, the kind of place where kids rode bikes until dusk and neighbors waved from their driveways. My name's Alex, a single dad with a teenage daughter, Emma, and a scruffy mutt named Max. We were ready for a new chapter, far from the city's chaos. The house wasn't perfect, but it was ours, free from the suffocating rules of the apartments we'd left behind. Moving day was a blur of excitement. Emma blasted music while unpacking her room, and Max bounded around the backyard, chasing squirrels. The neighbors seemed friendly enough at first, a quick nod from the guy mowing his lawn, a smile from an older couple walking their dog. I felt like we belonged. The house sat just outside the Willow Creek Homeowners Association's boundary, a detail I'd barely noticed when signing the papers. It meant no HOA fees, no strict guidelines about fence heights or mailbox colors. Freedom, or so I thought. But something felt off. A few days in, I noticed a woman across the street, always watching from her window. Her name, I'd later learn, was Karen, the unofficial queen of Willow Creek's HOA. Her house was pristine, her lawn flawless, her life seemingly dedicated to enforcing order. She'd glance at my slightly overgrown grass or the moving boxes still stacked on the porch, her lips pursed in disapproval. It was subtle at first, just a feeling, like a storm brewing on a clear day. I shrugged it off, focused on settling in, but deep down, I sensed trouble. Little did I know, Karen's watchful eyes were about to turn my dream home into a battleground. The first sign of trouble came a week after we moved in. I was sipping coffee on the porch, watching Emma toss a ball to Max in the yard, when a crisp envelope appeared in my mailbox. No stamp, just my name scrawled in sharp, angry handwriting. Inside was a letter from the Willow Creek HOA, signed by Karen herself, demanding I mow my lawn to a respectable length and remove the unsightly, moving boxes from my porch. The tone was icy, authoritative, as if I'd personally offended the neighborhood's honor. I chuckled, tossing the letter aside. My house wasn't in the HOA. They had no power over me. Or so I thought. Days later, Karen appeared at my doorstep, her smile as tight as her perfectly pressed blouse. She introduced herself as the HOA president, her voice dripping with false sweetness. She, kindly, reminded me that even non-HOA homes needed to uphold community standards to keep property values high. Her eyes darted to the boxes, then to Max, who was happily digging near the fence. She suggested I keep him on a leash at all times to avoid disturbing neighbors. I nodded politely, biting back my irritation. I didn't want trouble, not when we were just settling in. But as she walked away, her heels clicking on the pavement, I felt a knot in my stomach. This wasn't over. The demands escalated quickly. Another letter arrived, this time citing my porch light, a warm, vintage fixture I loved, for being non-compliant with the HOA's approved wattage. Then came a notice about my mailbox, which was apparently the wrong shade of black. Each letter was more aggressive, hinting at fines or further action if I didn't comply. I called the HOA office, expecting a misunderstanding, but Karen's voice on the line was unyielding. "We influence our boundaries," she said, her tone smug. I hung up, my hands shaking. Influence? What did that mean? I started noticing subtle changes in the neighborhood. The friendly nods from neighbors turned into sidelong glances. The guy who mowed his lawn stopped waving. Emma mentioned kids at school whispering about the new guy who's causing trouble. I tried to brush it off, but the pressure was mounting. Then came the first real blow. A city inspector showed up, claiming an anonymous complaint about my property's unkempt appearance. He pointed to the grass, the boxes, even Max's muddy paw prints on the driveway. I explained I wasn't in the HOA, but he just shrugged, handing me a citation with a $200 fine. I knew who was behind it. Karen's smug face flashed in my mind. I decided to fight back, politely but firmly. I mowed the lawn, painted the mailbox, and even swapped out the porch light, thinking compliance would end the harassment. It didn't. The next letter demanded I remove a small garden bed Emma had planted in the front yard, calling it a violation of aesthetic uniformity. I was livid. Emma had spent hours planting those flowers, her first real project in our new home. Seeing her face fall when I told her about the letter ignited something in me. This wasn't just about rules, it was personal. I dug into the HOA's bylaws, spending late nights poring over legal jargon. My house was indeed outside their jurisdiction, but Karen's letters referenced vague city ordinances about community standards. I called a lawyer friend who warned me that HOAs like Willow Creek often wielded unofficial power through connections with local officials. They can make your life hell without breaking a single law, he said. I felt trapped, like a target in a game I hadn't signed up to play. But giving in felt worse. The harassment took a darker turn. One morning, I found a note taped to my door. Move out or regret it. No signature, but Karen's handwriting was unmistakable. That same week, Max came limping home, his paw bleeding from a sharp rock someone had tossed into our yard. Emma was distraught, cradling him while I cleaned the wound. My blood boiled. This wasn't just petty, it was cruel. I confronted Karen at the next HOA meeting, a tense gathering in the community center where neighbors avoided my gaze. I held up the note, demanding answers. Karen's face remained calm, her voice syrupy as she denied everything. We only want what's best for Willow Creek, she said, her eyes cold. The room was silent, but I felt the weight of every stare. Then came the legal threat. A certified letter arrived, claiming my property's non-compliance was grounds for a lien if I didn't address the violations within 30 days. The violations? A list of absurdities. My car parked too close to the street, my trash cans visible for an hour after pickup, even the color of my curtains. I started documenting everything. The letters, the citations, the notes, even photos of the rock in Max's paw. I installed a cheap security camera, catching Karen lingering near my mailbox one night, her flashlight sweeping over my yard. The footage was grainy, but it was proof. I shared it with my lawyer friend, who suggested I take it to the city council. But before I could, the neighborhood turned outright hostile. Eggs splattered my windows. Trash appeared on my lawn. Emma stopped going outside, her laughter replaced by anxious silence. I felt like I was losing not just my home, but the life I'd promised her. The breaking point came when Karen rallied the HOA to petition the city for a neighborhood beautification ordinance. If passed, it would force all homes, even those outside the HOA, to follow their rules or face steep penalties. The petition hearing was scheduled in 2 weeks, and Karen was already campaigning, knocking on doors with her clipboard and her fake smile. I overheard her telling a neighbor my house was dragging down property values. The audacity floored me. My home wasn't perfect, but it was mine, and I'd worked hard for it. Now, this woman was trying to rewrite the rules to control me. I couldn't let her win. I started talking to neighbors, hoping to find allies. Most avoided me, but a few whispered their own stories of Karen's tyranny. Fines for minor infractions, threats over holiday decorations, even a family pressure to sell after refusing to comply. Their fear was palpable, but so was their resentment. I realized I wasn't just fighting for myself. I was fighting for everyone she'd bullied. But time was running out, and the hearing loomed. The day of the city council hearing arrived like a storm front, heavy with anticipation and dread. Willow Creek's community center was packed, neighbors crammed into folding chairs, whispering under the hum of fluorescent lights. Karen stood at the podium first, her posture ramrod straight, clipboard in hand, as she launched into her speech. She painted a picture of a pristine neighborhood threatened by rogue properties, like mine, her voice rising with righteous indignation. She waved the petition, signed by dozens, demanding the new beautification ordinance that would extend HOA control to every home in the area. Her eyes locked on me from across the room, a silent challenge. I sat in the back row, heart pounding, Emma beside me, clutching Max's leash. This was it, the moment where everything could shatter or shift. As Karen wrapped up, applause rippled through the crowd, mostly from her loyalists. The council members nodded politely, but I caught a flicker of skepticism in their eyes. It was my turn. I walked to the podium, legs feeling like lead, my folder of evidence tucked under my arm. The room fell silent, tension thick enough to cut. I started calmly, introducing myself as the new resident whose home wasn't in the HOA, yet had been targeted relentlessly. I described the letters, the citations, the harassment, each one a jab at my freedom. Murmurs spread as I projected photos on the screen. The anonymous note, the rock from Max's paw, the security footage of Karen skulking near my property. But Karen wasn't one to sit idle. She interrupted, her voice sharp, objecting to my baseless accusations. The council chair warned her, but the damage was done. The air crackled with confrontation. I pressed on, revealing emails I'd uncovered through a public records request. They showed Karen's cozy relationship with city officials, pushing for selective enforcement of obscure codes. One email even boasted about handling non-compliant neighbors to protect our values. Gasps echoed as I read excerpts aloud. Karen's face flushed, her composure cracking like thin ice. The intensity peaked when I called on the allies I'd gathered. One by one, hesitant neighbors stood. First, an elderly man who'd been fined for his holiday lights years ago, his voice trembling as he described Karen's threats. Then, a young mother who'd nearly lost her home over a fence dispute, her story laced with tears. Their testimonies built like a wave, exposing the pattern of abuse, the petty fines, the intimidation, the way Karen wielded the HOA like a personal weapon. The room shifted, whispers turned to nods of agreement. Karen squirmed in her seat, her earlier confidence evaporating. Sensing the tide turning, Karen bolted to her feet, demanding the floor. "This is slander," she cried, her finger jabbing toward me. But the council silenced her, intrigued by the mounting evidence. I dropped the bombshell, a recording from my security camera, not just the footage, but audio I'd enhanced. It captured Karen muttering to a neighbor about making that outsider pay and hinting at more sabotage. Playing it sent shockwaves through the audience. Karen's eyes widened in horror, her hands clenching the armrests. The public humiliation was palpable. She, the self-appointed guardian of order, exposed as a bully. The council erupted into questions, grilling Karen on her actions. She stammered, deflecting with claims of community service, but her words fell flat. One council member, a stern woman with a no-nonsense glare, pointed out the ethical violations in her emails. Another questioned the validity of the petition, noting signatures from people who'd confided in me about being coerced. Karen's empire crumbled in real time, her face a mask of fury and defeat. I felt a surge of vindication, mixed with the raw anger of months endured. Emma squeezed my hand, her eyes shining with pride, while Max whined softly at our feet. But the climax wasn't just exposure. It was the legal twist that sealed it. As the hearing progressed, my lawyer friend, who'd joined me, presented a motion to investigate the HOA for overreach and potential fraud. He cited state laws against harassment and abuse of power, backed by my documentation. The council, now fully engaged, voted unanimously to table the petition and launch an inquiry into Willow Creek's HOA practices. Cheers broke out from the back, from those long silenced. Karen stormed out, her heels echoing like retreating thunder, but not before shooting me a glare that promised retribution. Yet in that moment, I knew the power had shifted. In the weeks following the city council hearing, the neighborhood of Willow Creek felt like it had been shaken from a long slumber. The inquiry into the HOA's practices unfolded swiftly, a cascade of revelations that peeled back layers of pettiness and power abuse I'd only glimpsed before. City officials dug deep, reviewing records, interviewing residents, and scrutinizing every fine and citation issued under Karen's watch. What emerged was a pattern far uglier than my own ordeal, a web of selective enforcement, favoritism, and even financial irregularities. Karen had been skimming from HOA funds for personal expenses, like landscaping her own yard or funding neighborhood events that conveniently boosted her image. The evidence was damning, compiled from anonymous tips that flooded in once the dam broke. I watched it all from my porch, that same wraparound haven where the nightmare began. Emma played in the yard again, her laughter returning like spring after a harsh winter. Max chased squirrels without a limp, his paw healed and his spirit unbroken. The citations against me vanished, dismissed as baseless in light of the inquiry. The $1,000 fine? refunded with an apology from the city. But the real victory wasn't in the paperwork. It was in the shifting dynamics of the street. Neighbors who'd once averted their eyes now stopped by with coffee, sharing stories of their own brushes with Karen's tyranny. The elderly man from the hearing confessed he'd been too scared to speak up before, fined repeatedly for his bird feeders that attracted pests. The young mother revealed how Karen had threatened her with eviction notices over a child's swing set. Their relief was tangible, a collective exhale that lightened the air. Karen's downfall was as swift as it was satisfying. The council stripped her of her HOA presidency within days, citing gross misconduct. She fought it, of course, hiring a lawyer and firing off emails laced with indignation, but the momentum was against her. The inquiry's findings led to formal charges, misdemeanor embezzlement and harassment. She avoided jail time, but the fines were steep, eating into her savings and forcing her to sell off some of her pristine possessions. Her house, once the epitome of neighborhood perfection, went on the market months later, its for sale sign a stark symbol of her defeat. Rumors swirled that she moved to a condo in the city, far from the suburban empire she'd ruled. I never saw her again, but the image of her storming out of that hearing lingered, a reminder that even the most entrenched bullies could crumble. The long-term consequences rippled outward, transforming Willow Creek in ways I hadn't anticipated. The HOA itself underwent a massive overhaul. New bylaws were drafted with input from all residents, emphasizing fairness over control. Gone were the absurd rules about curtain colors or mailbox shades. In their place came reasonable guidelines focused on true community benefits, like shared green spaces and emergency funds. Elections for board members became transparent, with term limits to prevent any one person from dominating. Several of Karen's allies stepped down quietly, their own minor infractions exposed in the process. The neighborhood blossomed, literally and figuratively. Gardens popped up in front yards without fear of reprisal. Holiday decorations twinkled brighter. And impromptu block parties fostered the kind of genuine connections that rules could never enforce. For me, the impact was profoundly personal. My home, once a battleground, became a sanctuary. Emma thrived at school, no longer whispered about as the daughter of that troublemaker. She even started a small club for neighborhood kids, planting community gardens that symbolized our collective reclaiming of space. Max roamed freely, his joyful barks echoing without the shadow of sabotage. I found myself more involved in local affairs, volunteering on the revamped HOA board to ensure the lessons learned stuck. It wasn't about power, it was about balance, about protecting the freedom that drew me to Willow Creek in the first place. But the changes extended beyond our street. The story spread through local news and social media, sparking discussions about HOA overreach across the state. Other neighborhoods reached out, sharing similar tales and seeking advice on challenging their own Karens. My lawyer friend joked that I'd become an accidental activist, but there was truth in it. I spoke at a few town halls, not as a hero, but as someone who'd stared down absurdity and won. The emotional toll lingered. Nights when I'd wake up replaying the harassment, the fear in Emma's eyes, but it faded with time, replaced by a quiet strength. We'd endured, and in enduring, we'd grown. Reflecting on it all, the absurdity of the situation struck me anew. A woman I'd never met, armed with nothing but a clipboard and a sense of entitlement, had nearly upended my life over grass length and porch lights. It highlighted the pettiness that festers in unchecked power, how small rules can mask big egos. Yet, in standing firm, I'd uncovered a community ready to heal. The unfairness that fueled Karen's demands, her need to control what wasn't hers, ultimately unraveled her world. The powerful takeaway? In the face of neighborhood tyrants, silence is their greatest ally. Speaking up, gathering evidence, and rallying others can turn the tide, exposing the fragility of their thrones. It's a reminder that homes are more than property. They're havens worth fighting for. And in Willow Creek, we prove that even outside the lines, unity can redraw the map. What battles have you faced in your own backyard? Share in the comments. Your story might inspire the next victory.